Brian Moran, founder of Government CIO. Welcome to Government CIO Magazine.
Hi, my name is Michelle Shoker with Government CIO Magazine, and today we will be speaking with Zack Goldstein, the Chief Information Officer of the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration.
It's going well, although it's resource constrained, so we can move as fast as the resources allow. Right after I became the acting CIO, the NOAA leadership, Dr. Sullivan, articulated our vision to a meeting of the future NOAA leaders. And that vision was for consolidated infrastructure and consolidated IT services, not with the aim in the first place of trying to save money, but with the aim of increasing cycle time or decreasing cycle time. Right now it can take weeks, it can take months, maybe even years to transform a good idea into an IT reality. And our vision is to take that down from years to months and weeks, and thereby advance NOAA's mission faster with the same amount of dollars that we have today. To get there requires making investments in developing shared services and developing common infrastructure. And that's been a harder thing to do. One idea that is advanced in the President's budget is to put out a several billion-dollar loan fund whereby agencies can borrow money from the Treasury to modernize legacy systems, to put in place new systems, terminate legacy systems, and then pay that back with the cost avoidances or savings that are reaped by doing that modernization. My hope is that that measure or something like it will become law and be something that we and every other agency in the government will get competitive, can tap into. Short of that, we've gotten a new authority under the FITARA legislation, the Federal IT Acquisition Reform Act. And the most important thing that that act does, in my view, is it drives a partnership between the Chief Financial Officer community and the acquisition community and the CIO community. And through that partnership, all of us will get visibility over spending that right now is in the shadows. It's very easy to spend money and build a new system when you have a contractor team augmenting a federal team and developing software, and that new system was just an assignment that you gave. The visibility that we get under FITARA will allow all the folks who are responsible and now accountable for how we spend those dollars to see the details and identify opportunities to consolidate and then get the same service for, or greater service for the same amount of money that you're paying now. And then achieve the vision of coming up with enough money to make that initial investment to create a service or a common infrastructure. And then when you get the cost avoidance as a consequence of that, you can turn those savings, if you will, they're not really savings, it's freed up IT dollars, to developing mission applications. So instead of someone who's working on the next application for a fire meteorologist, instead of that person having to worry about where's my server, what application environment am I writing in, they can spend all their time working on that next application. And that's how, by consolidating infrastructure, we can free up the resources to write applications in modern environments that are going and write them faster. We've been able to make some progress, even without the extra visibility from FITARA or the new President's modernization fund. We're in the process of migrating desktops to a corporate operation. So a couple of years ago, we have a part of NOAA that runs the ships and planes. How many of your viewers or listeners know that much about NOAA? Maybe they could research that. That wasn't your question, but we have a fleet. We have a fleet of planes. That's where hurricane hunters reside. We have ships that chart the coast and do a lot of other environmental surveys. They're both critical observing platforms to our mission of protecting life and property and protecting the environment. They had a separate IT desktop environment. They saved a whole bunch of money or avoided a whole bunch of costs that they were able then to turn into working on shipboard IT and applications that they use to manage their ships and planes by taking their desktops and merging it with the desktops that I manage for the chief financial officer, for HR, for all the staff offices. This year we expect to move the headquarters operation of our NOAA research line office. And their headquarters IT, again, will be moving into the corporate IT desktop with the expectation that the dollars that they don't have to spend on managing their servers and their desktops can be used to improve their applications. And again, reduce that cycle time, the time it takes for a good idea to become manifest as something that really advances our mission. So we've been doing that, making some pretty good progress. It would be faster if we had access to an investment fund. It will speed up as we get into the details of how people are spending money today. But despite that, we're still making pretty good progress. We're rolling out something called TICAPs, Trusted Internet Connection Access Points, nationwide. We just underwent an audit from the Department of Homeland Security. Results aren't in yet, but it's promising. I'm expecting that they're going to be showing that upwards of 80% of the required controls are already in place. Soon will be much higher. Even at 80%, this is an enormous buffer between NOAA's systems and the threats of the outside world. All NOAA traffic, well, most NOAA traffic, the vast majority of NOAA traffic, say it that way, is traversing our TICAPs today. That's a very critical enterprise service that we provide. Not only do we get the protection of the trusted internet connections and the controls embedded in them, but we also get visibility over who's trying to get at us. And that's important for planning our cyber defense and doing our active cyber defense. We've been very fortunate to get a lot of the money so far that we've asked for in high performance computing. We've been making great strides in modernizing both the supercomputers we use for research and development, as well as the computers we use to generate the numerical forecast, which is the basis for the outstanding forecasters that the National Weather Service has to build upon and make the forecasts and the watches and warnings that are so critical to protecting life and property across this country. Because of the investments that we've been funded by the American people and the representatives in the Congress to make, we've been able to not only amp up our research and development, but take what we develop in our research computers, transition that to operations, and introduce much higher granularity in the forecasting models than we have ever had before. And that's real improvements in real people's lives that are enabled by making smart investments in IT. It's one of the reasons why I really love working at NOAA. It's one of the few places in the world where you can draw a direct connection between getting IT right and making a difference in everybody's life. And that's cool. It's a cool place to be. Anyway, so we've made some real progress in high performance computing. That's all on the unified, on the enterprise-wide side. On the mission-specific side, we've been making some outstanding improvements as well. We are about to award a new Advanced Weather Information Processing System contract, AWIPS, for the National Weather Service. That's going to improve the ability of forecasters to make use of new data coming from new satellites, which we either have or are about to launch. This fall, we expect to launch the GOES-R satellite. GOES stands for Geostationary Environmental Operational Satellite. R will be dropped and get a number, I can't remember the number it'll become, but that satellite will result in an order of magnitude improvement in the granularity and volume of data that we get from Earth observation, as will the new polar satellite that we expect to launch this coming year, the Joint Polar Satellite System Satellite number 1, JPSS-1, both of which, you think, well, satellites, where's the IT? GOES-R has a brand new ground system to command and control the satellite and process all the data. JPSS, the system that will support that, is undergoing a major modernization with improved security, improved operations as well. So those are some very specific things that are on the horizon. We just launched the Discover satellite, which is which also comes with a brand new ground system, and that satellite, or enhancement actually to an existing ground system, and that satellite that was launched in February of 2015 is a sentinel that stands on orbit between the sun and the Earth to provide critical warning for solar space weather, and it gives us a good idea of what the sun's about to do, and most importantly, it has sensors on it that tell us what the sun actually has done, with a little bit of warning for the planet to take action if a big burst of solar particles is heading our way. So some real improvements that are all IT enabled, both on the horizon and recently achieved. Public and private is a part of what I've done. I've also had experiences in the public sector, working on the legislative branch and working in the executive branch. I've worked as an auditor. I've worked as an auditee. I've been a political appointee. I'm a career civil servant today. And in the private sector, I was a manager, director, vice president in a systems integration firm for 10 years, and I was self-employed for 4 years as an IT consultant. And what that means is that I've had to make a profit on government contracts. I've had to award government contracts. I understand how companies are treated by the government because I've experienced it myself. I know what happens when the government puts out request for proposal where the response is due between Christmas and New Year's. I vow never to knowingly do that myself because I know what it feels like. I know what it takes to make a profit. There's nothing wrong with that. I know what it takes to manage companies that are trying to make a profit. I've been on the winning and losing side of proposals. I've had to compete. I know what competition can achieve. I also know what the limits of competition are when you're trying to get the best value for the American taxpayer. So the other thing that I've done is in both government and the private sector, I've had to work not only on the technical side of IT, but also on the functional side. What do you get for it? I've done business process improvement support in the private sector as well as in the public sector. So you take all that together, what does it give you? It gives you understanding of where the other person is sitting, which is critical to communication. And communication and getting that right, getting the message clear, and making sure that you understand where the person you're communicating with or the organization you're communicating with is coming from, and thereby telling your message so that it can be understood, making sure it's understood, is critical because most of the mistakes we make and most of the successes we make are about getting communication right. When we say, well, it's about getting the requirements, and that's a standard interview question. You're interviewing somebody for CIO type jobs. What's the biggest mistake that people make in building an IT system? Well, it's about the requirements. But being about the requirements is actually being about communicating. And what I think my background has given me that I leverage is knowing where all these other players that we have to deal with, be it the legislators who are giving us appropriation, the auditors who are doing their job. I have a lot of respect for it, having been one. The contractors who are trying to make a living and do the best they can for the taxpayers who pay their salaries indirectly, or sacred trust that we have with the taxpayers to husband their dollars wisely. Those perspectives I believe allow me to be a better communicator than I would have otherwise been if I hadn't been. And then that idea that in all of those places, I've not only, for example, audited an IT program, but I've audited process improvement. I've done IT and I've done process improvement. I've had to manage the profit centers in a private sector. I've done private sector work for the private sector. With those perspectives, it's invaluable not only to be able to communicate, but it's invaluable to be able to translate from the technical to the non-technical, which is what I think is the real key to the success of a CIO, is being able to take technical jargon and translate it into what does it mean to the business person? What does it mean to the functional owner? And the reverse. That's how you get the requirements right. That's how you meet your customers' needs. We've had some challenges. We expected that we would have difficulty in getting our data to our collaborators. And we weren't surprised by that. It took time, but we got through it. Most of our archives are in tape. And so going from tape to disk and then over the wires to the cloud folks, the 5 cloud providers that are our cooperative research and development agreement, cooperative research and development agreement partners. It took a while, and it takes time, but we knew that. The surprise was how much we'd have to work with our collaborators to help them understand the opportunities for leveraging NOAA data in the private sector. We had an inkling of that when we first went out with our request for information. And I guess it wasn't that big a surprise, but it was something that has been taking more time than we anticipated when we started this effort almost 2 years ago. We went out with a request for information originally, thinking that based on the responses, we'd put together an RFP and we'd award a contract. And when we had these sessions, people came to us and they said, well, if you give us money, we can make your data available. But we already knew that. And the idea of our big data project isn't about buying a bunch of infrastructure and having people come. It's about coming up with a new business model for open data. When the open data initiatives came out of the administration, in fact, one of the first things that was signed by President Obama was an open data executive order. I think he signed it on day 1 or day 2 of his administration, almost over 7 years ago now. When he did that, it's a great idea. It's something that NOAA has been supporting. The fact that our data is accessible is the reason why there's a weather industry today. That's not hyperbole. The companies that provide you weather forecast information and are our dear partners in the weather enterprise don't own weather satellites. The American people own weather satellites and NOAA flies them. Many of them do own supercomputers, but the basic forecasts that many forecasts are based upon are the American people's supercomputers that are operated by NOAA. Some of them have, some local TV stations have Doppler radar, a few, many more are getting out of it. The radars that you see when you see satellite/radar on the big map of the United States on the evening news, that's a NOAA radar. The American people's radar operated by NOAA. So we already get all of our data out there. And the weather industry adds enormous value in making sure that people understand the science behind the weather and what's really happening, and they add great value in what's going to happen on that block or what's likely to happen in this area. But they're building upon the raw data that the people pay us to gather and analyze and then make available. So we know how to do that. The big data project isn't about doing more of the same. It's about seeing if there's a business model that can allow us to make more data available without costing the taxpayers more money. The idea is that if additional data sets can enable climate prediction or microclimate for the next 6 months, what's going to likely happen on this shoreline, support the reinsurance industry, support agriculture, support transportation. If people can build businesses, just like the weather industry did, and monetize the data that we gather, then a piece of that profit that they make, a piece of their revenue, I guess, get it right, can go to cover our costs to making the data available to them, and therefore, and thereby, enable entire industries to be promoted without having to spend additional taxpayer dollars. So, when we put out the RFI and the folks came to us and they said, so if you give us money, we can make that data available, we said, no, that's the old one. Who understands what we're talking about? And there were lots of folks who said, oh, I can make money on that. And we said, great, what are your ideas? And they said, well, here's an idea or two, not sure if it'll really work. And they said, well, how much is it going to cost to get access to your data? And we said, gee, we don't have a cost accounting system that tells us that today. And if we're going to be putting it in the cloud and hosting it, and you're going to be accessing it next to the compute, we haven't done that before, so we got to figure that out. So we've got these two big things that people have to figure out. We got to figure out what can I make money doing, and how much is it going to cost us to get it to them, which implied we have to do research. So instead of entering into contracts with the folks who responded to our RFIs, we entered into 5 cooperative research and development agreements. So the things we expected, because your question, that's a lot of background, but your question was what are the surprises? So the things we expected were that we were going to have to figure out what it was going to take to most efficiently get the data to our collaborators. They were going to have to figure out, because we knew we had some challenges, as I said at the beginning, we knew it was going to take some time and we'd have to optimize it and we'd have to deal with some of the infrastructure challenges. And the collaborators are going to have to figure out what kind of money they can make on what kinds of data sets. The surprise was that we were going to have to collaborate with our collaborators so extensively on both. So, because the most important thing is to get value out of the data, we've been spending most of our time on getting data to the collaborators, working with them so they understand what the data really means, so making connections between the collaborators who are cloud providers and not necessarily subject matter experts in climate data or weather data or ocean data or fisheries data, and you would expect them to be. But we've been helping to make the linkages to those communities so they can start seeing the business cases. Now we're turning to our piece of the research and development, which is what does it take for us to optimize our getting data to the collaborators so they can do their thing. And we've already had some successes. And the surprise, it's the challenge is coming up with more of them, but it's I guess we expected that there'd be value, and it's not a surprise to find that there is value. But one of the things that we've discovered is that we put our radar data up in the web of our collaborators, and we transferred the data to them. And there's the entire history of weather radar data is now available in the cloud. And if somebody wants to access it, they can download it for free. If they want to use it in the cloud of the cloud provider that's holding it, they can pay to use it, or they can just download it for free. In the process, once all that data was up there, not only did the collaborators discover a dramatic increase in traffic to their cloud, which is what they're about, that's a good thing, we discovered a dramatic decrease in access to those historical radar data sets from our archive, which is a really good thing, because that means that we can control the growth in the cost that the American taxpayers have to fund, while entire industries may be stimulated by accessing the very same data in a much more accessible place. That would be the cloud of our collaborators. So You asked about surprise. It's a very pleasant surprise. It's what we hoped, I guess, would happen. And we're seeing it. And we're also seeing, here's a surprise, here's another pleasant surprise. We knew that people would want to use the data for climate purposes and research. What didn't occur to us is that the data that we've put up there, one of the data sets we put up there, is of very high granularity. And if you're doing the weather, then you ignore the noise that might come from birds or bees or other kinds of things, and you focus on the return signal that you get from a raindrop or a snowflake or a cloud or something of, or a weather front, something of meteorological interest. Well, there are people who care, as you'd expect, about bird migration and insect behavior, and they didn't know, because to everybody else it was noise. So but that was to the noise of a weather forecaster or a climatologist is the signal. If you're looking at bird migration or bees and how they're behaving, so that was a really pleasant surprise that it was something we hoped for. That not only would the expected uses be found, but unpredictable uses as people get the data and they can find it easy to access. They can find all sorts of new purposes, and that's a great thing. There are other lessons learned that we expected. We knew that we have to worry about the quality of the data. Some of the data we've put out, the collaborators look at it, and people try to use it, and they say, "Do you know you've got this systematic error in your metadata?" And that's ours to fix. It's our job. But what's really cool now is instead of some researcher who happens to download something and finds a mistake that we missed and tells us so we can go back and fix it, now we have all these extra eyes, and they're looking at all this data. And so when we make a fix, instead of fixing one data set, it can fix 30,000 data sets at the same time. So we're getting efficiencies in our own quality control that we didn't anticipate. So that's a really nice surprise too. So no bad surprises, just good ones.